Hello and welcome back to the Sports Ethos Fantasy MLB Today podcast. In person now, live. For those not watching, we do have a fantastic guest with us today. That is Aaron Diaz for the American League East Preview podcast. Aaron is a former producer of the Batter's Box for WRHU. Very accomplished baseball mind himself. Also written for the Hofstra Chronicle, covering Hofstra baseball as well. Big Yankee fan for those who can't tell with the Yankee cap already, and a great guest to have just to give us insight on his own team's division going into 2025. And a lot of news pertaining to the Yankees, Aaron. At first, I got to say sorry about all the pitching injuries. Met fan myself. I know how it feels, but you holding up okay?
Yeah, I mean, always coming into the season, there's a lot of different things that can happen. But obviously, Garrett Cole not being here anymore for the year is a big hole in that rotation. But well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I know we've been very good friends at Hofstra for the past couple of years, so it's an honor to be here talking more baseball with you. I know we talked so much baseball on our long walks back to our cars when we would be at school, but like I said, I mean, losing Garrett Cole really opens up the division. So it's going to be an interesting conversation to see how it's going to turn out and how things are going to play out really between the Yankees, Boston, and Baltimore, really.
And of course, the AL East is always one of the most competitive divisions in baseball, and that for me is the most exciting thing about discussing that is you have 5 teams that are attempting to win, and that really can't be said for almost any division in baseball. Or you have a couple stragglers, the Marlins, the Rockies, the White Sox, that are really just there to see who can give away more games to those who are actually competing for postseason spots. But there aren't any free games in the AL East, which I'm most excited about. And there's not any free opportunities at BetOnline, but there certainly are opportunities to make some money. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. So getting into the team by team, and just a preview of how we'll format this, we'll discuss each team individually, obviously let you guys know our inputs on those fantasy relevant players as far as draft stock and ADP, and talk about how we see the team needs for each squad playing out, ultimately culminating in having to address them now or at the trade deadline, or dying on the sword and having them cost them long term. And as we've got Aaron here, I feel like the only place to start is with the Yankees, who, of course, were the American League champions last year. Had an interesting offseason, starting with losing Juan Soto, which was a big blow for the Yankees, but rebounding quite nicely. Max Fried is where they spent most of their money, $218 million, 8 years, for one of the best left-handed pitchers in the game, which looks all the more important now that you've got 2 pitching injuries. Are you taking that as a full positive at this point?
Absolutely, yeah. Again, you look back at it when Fried came in, when we got him, the Yankees got him, and you saw it as a very much a positive. He was going to be your two starter, right behind Cole and in front of Rodon. So that set you up for a nice 1-2-3. Now, obviously, losing Cole, he's going to be your ace now, but he has ace level stuff. So you still are in a comfortable position enough to be like, okay, the Yankees can do something with this. And say last year, if Cole was out last year, that would have been I felt in that position, it would have been a bigger hole last year than it is this year. So getting Fried and kind of stabilizing that rotation this year was such a big thing. And looking back at it, it was huge for them. So then now you look at, and not even Fried, but even the whole offseason in general. Yes, last year Juan Soto was the big get. That's what we got last year, and he was obviously the person we wanted this year. They weren't able to get him. So now getting Bellinger, getting Goldschmidt, you're setting up a nice offense, kind of picking at the corners that they didn't have last year, if you understand what I'm saying.
Of course. And it all is about supporting Aaron Judge in that lineup because Judge, even at his age, is still debatably the best hitter in baseball, certainly the most fear inducing hitter in baseball. To have veteran hitters that the Yankees are obviously hoping for bounce backs from, combined with a couple of young guys, whether it be Jazz Chisholm, who's really looking for a breakout, or Jason Dominguez, who seems like he's finally going to get a chance to play every day. I mean, that Jason Dominguez opportunity is really a silver lining for the Yankees, getting an opportunity to get him in the lineup finally after all the injuries, the Tommy John surgery, the struggles playing left field without the reps. And now it seems like the Yankees are committed to making him their everyday left fielder. Are you optimistic about the idea of Jason Dominguez?
I'm optimistic about his bat. His bat is going to be something that everyone's going to be looking at. His defense, I mean, necessarily, I think they should leave him in center. I Sometimes when you play around with stuff like that too much, it doesn't go well for you. And now I do understand that what Aaron Boone is saying. He said it a couple weeks ago on a podcast I was listening to on the Michael K show. Actually, he said that in an interview he was saying, "Yeah, we're gonna do it because they saw it in a particular way that they can move stuff around if they need Judge to DH and stuff like that." But I just think Dominguez is if he's having so much trouble in left, he's probably going to be also having trouble in center as well. So don't try to change things and make it more harder on him because essentially he came back in 20 and he came up in 2023 and had a nice end to the season. Everyone's like, "Wow, this guy's going to be great." Last year, obviously had some injuries. He came up late again, didn't have the impact he had. So he's really starting this year off a clean slate. He's kind of evened out, if you really ask me. So Dominguez he has a lot of pressure on himself, but I think he'll be fine. And then sometimes you also have to see whether he's even considered to be a switch hitter because he only bats well from one side of the plate. So again, there's a lot of these questions that the Yankees have to answer, and I feel like they're playing around too much with him instead of just making him play and seeing what he can do at his regular position. But there's so much pressure on him. That's the only thing that I have riding on him is the pressure. Is the pressure going to get to him when the season finally starts in a couple weeks?
And we talk a lot about lineup construction, and that'll be something that's pretty easy for Dominguez in a lineup full of veterans. You can move him wherever is most comfortable. And it is one of the more overrated facets of baseball from a winning perspective, but not necessarily from a fantasy perspective of individual player value. So there's a lot of speculation about this. And my question to you is, who leads off and who hits right behind Aaron Judge now with Giancarlo Stanton out indefinitely?
Well, the leadoff spot is obviously going to be one that is still being considered right now as we're in spring training. But I think obviously numbers wise, you're gonna have to go with Austin Wells. Austin Wells has shown you. I don't really have you were always the numbers guy, so I know you probably have the numbers in front of you. Numbers, I'm not usually a huge numbers guy, but I know he's doing very well, considering that he's been batting in the leadoff spot the past couple games in spring training. So to me, it's either Wells or Jazz. I think if you really want to go towards, hey, let's if you're in a spot in the season where we need guys on base, you put Jazz in the one spot because he knows if he can get on base, he's gonna steal second. He's gonna steal a couple bags. He's gonna be a nice kind of speed guy on the bases, and then you have Judge behind them, and then you can also switch, Wells to the cleanup spot, and then behind Judge, I mean, Bellinger's the only one that I can think of right now, just going by lefty righty standards. But again, I think there's so many different aspects and so many different ways you could put a lineup like that. Because honestly, Goldschmidt, you could put Goldschmidt in the 4th spot as well. So depending if you want to go righty. Again, so many different aspects with that 1 through 5, 1 through 6, you can really put the lineup in. But I think you're better off going off with Wells and Jazz, depending on who you're facing that day.
And the other benefit of putting Wells in the leadoff spot over Chisholm is that you're going to hit Judge second every day with Soto gone.
Yeah.
He's your best hitter, obviously.
Yeah.
My concern is, and I saw this with the Mets, I've seen it even with the Angels, with lineups that are maybe a little lopsided, that players are afraid to run in front of their big hitter. Nobody wants to get thrown out on the bases stealing when Aaron Judge is at the plate. And the benefit of putting Wells there is if you put Jazz third or fourth in the lineup behind Judge, obviously Jazz still has that power to protect him, but it also enables him to run freely when he gets on base. He doesn't have to worry about getting thrown. If he walks ahead of Judge or gets a single ahead of Judge, he doesn't have to worry about getting thrown out on the base pass. He can just go because he knows that Bellinger is not that kind of threat where, you get caught. And it's like, oh, well, you're in scoring position at first base. This guy hits 60 home runs a year. Obviously, you're hoping for something in the high 20s from Bellinger, but it's not going to be Aaron Judge level. So of course, we know the lineup is going to be filled with those veterans. The bullpen for the Yankees, I think, seems like an afterthought at this point, just because of it's going to be good. They've obviously shorted up with Devin Williams. Luke Weaver was a great fix for them last season. And the Yankees are reliably one of the best teams when it comes to relief pitching development in all of baseball. So from all of the 35-year-olds that I see throwing gas that I've never heard of, going through just all of the savant pages of guys that we've got Statcast from spring training, there is no doubt that the Yankees will create a sufficient machine when it comes to developing, at a bare minimum, adequate middle relief, if not setup men for one of the best closers in baseball, Devin Williams. My question to you is the starting staff. You obviously look at the top of it and are pretty comfortable with Max Fried filling in for Garrett Cole after Cole was announced. For those who missed or living under a rock, Garrett Cole is missing all of 2025 and probably much of 26 after undergoing Tommy John surgery that's scheduled, I believe, for this week. But the Yankees still have a strong rotation. Past Clark Schmidt and Marcus Stroman, are there any names that you're looking at as a real internal option, or do you think they'll have to make a trade?
Well, actually, first thing, Garrett Cole is actually getting the Tommy John today. So I know the news broke out yesterday, and it was scheduled straight away for today. So I don't know if he's getting it as we speak, but it's for today. So after today, he'll be officially done. But
on the road recovery.
Yes. And the one name I'm looking at is Will Warren. Will Warren last year came up a couple times, was really bad. He did not have anything to offer in the majors at this level. But, getting sent back down and up and all with all the injuries that the Yankees had last season. And now all of a sudden, a lot of people are saying that he's revigorating himself, and now he's bound to make a statement this year. And honestly, it's looking like he's going to be in prime position to do that. So I'm looking at him, and a lot of people are saying that he reminds them of Clark Schmidt when he first came up. Same type of thing. He didn't really have his stuff, and then all of a sudden he turns into this gem. To me, he looks like Jonathan Loaizaga. Although Loaizaga is now not a starting pitcher, but are one of our relievers, it was the same thing a couple years ago. I don't know if anyone remembers, in 2018, 2019, around there, or Loaizaga came up and he was not it. I don't know why. He was just struggling, and then all of a sudden he's he's hurt now or he's coming back, but he's going to be one of your big guys in the bullpen. So again, and like you said, the Yankees bullpen is always going to be there. It's always going to be good. But I do see themselves, if they really need to, maybe a middle reliever, like you said, make a trade for someone. I definitely think that's always going to be an option, regardless if your bullpen is good or not. I know that they're going to have a setup man in Weaver, and then obviously your closer in Williams, and then you can have Weaver close sometimes too if Williams is having an off night or is off one night. So I know they have that kind of set up, but I don't know who they're going to trade for specifically. I think they're going to make more of a trade for a starting pitcher. I think that's the way they're going to go. I think the way it's going to lean more towards as we head into like late July.
And the last thing I'll ask you, obviously, giving us your faith in Will Warren, which he's got the stuff to be stable in MLB rotation. So I think that's a great shout. Are there any Yankees that you look at in terms of the way that they're currently being viewed as, maybe a little bit too zealously, maybe a little bit overhyped, or ones to tread with caution going into 2025?
Well, honestly, I don't think anyone is really overhyped at this point. to my knowledge, certainly myself, I don't see anyone as being overhyped. I think Judge is the best baseball player in Major League Baseball right now, up there with Shohei Ohtani. I think there's no way you can go around that. Um, I think Jazz for what I think a lot of people have said he's overhyped, but I think for what he was able to give you in the second half last year, even though the numbers won't really say it, but he was very good. He filled in your third base, and he was on the base. He made speed on the base path. So right now, I think if anything, there's more to prove. Has more to prove. Wells has more to prove. Judge has already given you what he can do. A lot of players. I think honestly, you could look at the Yankees as kind of underdogs if you really look at it in certain aspects, and losing a lot of players and people not believing in them and thinking that the Yankees can be good this year, specifically losing Cole, losing Stan, and all those guys. So honestly, I believe the Yankees just need to go into the season with a chip on the shoulder, which they do have. And that's why I believe the Yankees are going to be the division winners ultimately, because coming off a World Series loss, different kind of it's a different kind of I don't know how you say it, but different kind of just board material
Yeah,
in the offseason, right? Just looking at it a different way. They're coming. They want to do better this year, fixing their defense and fixing their offense and filling in those holes, even though they don't have a third baseman necessarily. But I do
yeah,
think the Yankees are considered more of an underdog because of all the injuries that they have. I don't believe anyone's really overhyped at this point. But like I
yeah.
said, the season starts in a couple weeks, and we just really have to see how they're going to play out.
And it's pretty rare that we can talk about the Yankees as an underdog of sorts. But there, in full fairness, there is that doubt. The name I'd shout in terms of my worry, at least for in terms of fantasy value, is Paul Goldschmidt at 170 ADP. Amongst first basemen who have produced better than him in recent years, you're really, and the Yankees are as well as a team, but relying on a bounce back from a guy who really had some concerning numbers when it came to bat speed. And I know you're not as into the bat speed analytics, and that we still don't know what the direct correlation is to hitter success. I'm more worried about that he went on the radio in St. Louis and more or less admitted that he feels like he's washed. But hey, look, a full offseason recovery, a new place,
Yeah.
a much more hitter friendly ballpark, a more winning, look at winning environments. St. Louis was not that. And the Yankees obviously have that installed. Now,
I mean, yeah, well,
sorry.
real quick on Goldschmidt. Yeah, I know. I remember being in class and you mentioned that to me a couple times. What's after the World Series and stuff like that. So I know Goldschmidt again is it's more on the downside, but it's really you're getting him more for your defense, and then if he can contribute any offense, that's going to be a big plus. But I really do think that he's going to be fine. And again, coming to a winning environment with Aaron Judge, two guys who won the MVP just a couple years ago. So you really and again, I think he makes that lineup better. I think Rizzo was on his way out. I think that's considered like, hey, like, and no one's has signed him. Signed him. He's still a free agent. So Goldschmidt was still a considerably valuable player in that sense. So I think he'll be fine. But again, just with him and everyone else, I think everyone needs to just do good. And the Yankees will do good, and that's just the name of the game, obviously. You just need to do good.
And they're the favorites, I still think, in the minds of many. My question going into and looking at this stacked Boston Red Sox team, which I would say are the biggest challengers,
Yeah.
is what kind of challenge are they going to put up? Not necessarily with the guys that are at the major league level now, but having Marcelo Meyer, Christian Campbell, and Roman Anthony all on the doorstep of the big leagues. I'd be admittedly surprised if any of them made the opening day roster, although there's certainly arguments, putting service time aside, for that to be the case. But even looking at just Jaron Duran and Rafi Devers and Alex Bregman, and you have Casas and Story, who you're hoping can recover from injury, and Cedane Rafaela that can maybe take a step forward after a rookie season of ups and downs, and hopefully can get some more sustained exit velocities after some difficulty hitting for the same power you'd have hoped. And they've made rotation additions. I mean, Garrett Crochet is in my opinion, a debatable Cy Young favorite. Lucas Giolito is going to feel like a new addition. They signed him for this purpose. Walker Buehler, of course, and maybe the fifth spot will be a little bit up for grabs. They may try and reclaim something out of Quinn Priester until they get some of their injured guys back, particularly Cutter Crawford. But Boston is one that I would personally expect to challenge the Yankees, and maybe you think give them a run for their money down the stretch.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and especially now that Cole is out. Now, honestly, if we were to have conversations and people were to say, I think the Red Sox are going to win the division, I wouldn't disagree. Obviously we'll have that conversation, but it's very likely that the Red Sox can very easily win this division as well. So there's a lot of different aspects you can look at it, but they had a great offseason. The Yankees did as well, but the Red Sox came in and they spent their money, I would say, pretty well. Only thing I would say, again, getting Bregman is a huge. It was huge. Once they got Bregman, I was like, man, this gets a lot closer than it would have been without him. But with Bregman, it's like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. It can work, but it doesn't quite fit. So I want to see how that plays out, and that little bit of a not mess, but camaraderie that happened when they signed him, and Devers like, I'm a third baseman. When not necessarily he's I would put Bregman at third. A lot of different things can come out of that. I really want to see how that translates into the regular season, how them as teammates, how they can battle from that. But the Red Sox, man, I mean, you look at their team as a whole. If the Yankees don't get off to a great start and stuff kind of lulls for them, the Red Sox can come surging, and that's what they did last year. They surprised a lot of people, including myself. They made a little bit of a run, and there was a certain point where I said I could see Boston taking over second, for either the Baltimore or the Yankees. So, and they kind of died down a little bit, but I see this year with the Yankees and the Red Sox as I saw last year with the Yankees and the Orioles. It's any teams. It depends who wants it more. Last year, obviously, you saw the Yankees and Orioles want to lose it more, right? Both teams just kept losing, and no one really wanted to gain any momentum. But this year, that's what I'm really looking at is the Red Sox have a lot to offer, and the Yankees have a lot to offer too. It's why they're rivals in the first place. This is going to be a big season for both of those teams.
And just to go back through the saga of Rafi Devers and the position change. So he was apparently promised to play third base by Chaim Bloom, who is now in St. Louis, not with the Red Sox anymore, when he signed that large $300+ million extension with the team a couple of years ago. Devers was asked about the possibility of playing first or being the DH at the beginning of spring training after Bregman was signed, and he said, I play third base, and was asked what he would do if he was asked to play first, and said no. So, of course, that's the first question that Alex Cora is then asked upon interviewing him. And Cora was very, very clear that this was a promise made by the prior regime, the people that made this promise. It was a verbal promise, not contractual, and it was made by somebody who's not here anymore, and that Boston is going to do what's best for the team. Now, Bregman is only signed for 4 seasons. With opt-outs. And Bregman has said, and his agent certainly has said, Scott Boras has said that he's willing to play second base. Now, the willingness from how you make people happy is pretty easy in terms of putting Devers at third, Casas at first, and Bregman at second for now. The challenge is that, what makes your team the best? Because Devers is debatably the worst defensive third baseman in baseball, and Bregman is one of the best. And Casas at first base is not a very good defender at all. Casas, of course, actually supported his teammate in Rafael Devers' decision to speak out against the possibility of playing first, probably because he wants his own job to be safe. But when Christian Campbell and Marcelo Meyer come up, there's going to be spots to be taken in the infield, and Campbell's played exclusively second base in spring training, and Meyer projects as the shortstop of the future. And maybe you assume that if Story doesn't get off to a great start, he's the one on the side. But can they really be affording to placate Devers for any more time by making their team worse and just postponing an inevitability, or at least what I would perceive to be an inevitability, of Bregman having to go to third, Devers going to first, to accommodate those young middle infielders?
I mean, I think the best way you can look at it is, you have to go with what gives you the best defense. And unfortunately, Devers doesn't give you that. Now he's a great bat, so you can put him at DH. But then again, there's so many pieces that you have to move around. That's why I understand why they got Bregman, but it's like a piece again that can fit. They can make it fit, but it doesn't really quite fit right now. So to me, the way I look at it is, sorry, Devers, you're moving out of third. That in all respect of the game, you put Bregman at third, and then you either put Devers at first or DH him, and then you, like you said, you bring those guys up. You can move Trevor Story to second, and you can put one of those guys at shortstop. Whoever, I'm not crazy, really into the prospects pool like that, but I know what, like you said, I think it was Meyer.
Yeah,
You put Meyer
Myers
as short. If they're gonna do anything, do it now. Don't wait. If they wait, I believe things will be worse for their team. If they're gonna wait it out, oh, let's see how the season turns out. If we're gonna move, sometimes you need to cut the cord. If you cut the cord now, it gives you a better chance to form a reliable squad as you're going into the season, and then not, having a lull, and you're losing. You lost your last 5 games out of last 6, and you're looking at it like, oh, what are we gonna do now? Now let's move Bregman to third. Then Devers is out of it. You understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
there's so many different ways you could look at it, but I think if you have a prospect pool that is very, very, highly, what you could say, highly regarded, I think do it now. If you're gonna do it, if you're gonna do it now.
And that makes the most sense in just not dragging out that drama to the regular season. Because the
Exactly.
last thing you want to have is some more nasty quotes. It's one thing to have it in spring training, but while you're trying to win games that matter, and then you still don't know who's playing second and who's playing third because the third baseman is making a fit over it. And that's something the Yankees handled quite well, I think, in just letting Gleyber Torres walk, who was very adamant for the Yankees. I'm playing second base. Was the worst second baseman in baseball defensively last year. I personally would have said you're moving to third or you don't play, but those are not the kind of situations that are as easy to deal with when you have a guy who's locked up for 10 years. Maybe with Gleyber, it's you let him go free agency.
No, yeah, of
Coffee's
course.
be there for a while.
Exactly. It's not always going to be a fun conversation to have, but like you said, it is going to be different. A guy that's going to be there for a longer time. Glaber really on his way out, honestly. But I remember again listening to an interview with Aaron Boone, or what sources said, that when Brian Cashman said they got Jazz to move him second, and Glaber didn't want to move, and Aaron Boone, being the friend, the player's manager, was like, look, let's just leave him there. And it ended up working out. Jazz was fine. If Jazz needs to play at third, I'm cool with that because I know he's gonna be fine. He maybe the stats won't say he was, but we won games. They made it to the World Series, so evidently it worked. But this year's gonna be obviously different. But I think Devers, for me, just move. Why make it such a fuss? I understand, yes, but you got your money already. I understand. If you know within yourself there's gonna be someone better, maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe he just knows that Bregman is better than him, and at defensively, and he doesn't want to, people to prove that. He wants to maybe go out there and play and try to play his best. But you've had so much time to do that, and you haven't shown it. Defensively, offensively is a juggernaut, but defensively, if you haven't shown it, then why are you going to continue to play there?
And fantasy wise, I'm certainly hoping that this maintains the way it is, because then it'll give Alex Bregman second base eligibility, which from a pure second fantasy perspective would be fantastic and definitely increase his value. Now, going into the Red Sox pitching, they overperformed quite considerably last year, and they seemingly have realized that. They've addressed those the Tanner Houck likely regression, and a couple of injuries to Brian Bello and Cutter Crawford by going out and getting Garrett Crochet. Do you see him as top one, top three, top five pitchers in baseball at this point? Obviously, a fantastic season with the White Sox, but tailed off as they tailed his innings down. Do you think he's built to sustain 162 games of 30 plus starts of excellence?
I believe so. I do think it's going to be a little different. I don't know if he's going to be so used to it as, I mean, again, it depends on the player too. Sometimes some players are built for that, but you're coming from a team that was the literally worst team we've ever seen in the history of baseball to now a contender for the division. It's a big ask for one guy, right? You're going over there and pitching an amazing. I think he's top five. I wouldn't really say top three, but top five, definitely top five. He's a great player, great pitcher. He has great stuff. I just think that he's gonna have to get used to the element of playing in Boston, playing in bigger games down the stretch, especially in July and August and in June when you're coming to Yankee Stadium and playing against the Yankees and going and playing in Fenway against the Yankees. There's going to be a lot of different situations that I feel that he needs to see first, and then as the season goes on, you can really plug him in, plug him out. But definitely top five for sure. Garrett Crochet is going to be he's going to be great for them this year.
So my question regarding Crochet will be the three players that are close to him, very starting pitchers that are close to him in terms of ADP right now. You've got Crochet, Logan Gilbert, and Corbin Burns. Is there a favorite of those three that in that cluster that you would prioritize over the other two?
I'll probably say Burns. Corbin
Okay.
Burns has shown you what he can do in not necessarily big games, but I mean last year he was with Baltimore and one of the best teams. They made the wild card. I mean, I think Burns is a guy that I would look at over those other two guys.
Yeah.
Just necessary and just not even looking at stats, but just by when you say his name, when you say those three names, I automatically go to Corbin Burns first. I think he's just a great guy. He's shown you what he can do in big situations, and he's an ace level guy. Whereas Crochet can be an ace level guy, but hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to show you that because of the teams he's been on. You understand?
Yeah, and I think that's very valid to look at track record in this case when you're looking at that high in drafts. I mean, Crochet has never really done it over a full season. I love Crochet's stuff. I think if you were to give me his stuff in a vacuum and guarantee a full season, I would take him. But Burns has done it time and time again. Gilbert, I probably, in terms of all things considered, like as the highest pick. But again, you've got the park factor considerations. You don't know how much of his stuff, the deception of the splitter, is created by pitching in Seattle and obviously not in the strongest of divisions. Whereas Crochet, of course, in that AL East is going to have a lot of serious competition from the right side. He's going to face Aaron Judge at least 15 times.
Exactly.
So that in and of itself could yield 5 home runs if he's not careful, especially if you face him in one of those weeks. I traded for Judge last year in fantasy, so I had him during those weeks where he seemed like he homered once or twice every day, putting crazy fantasy. It was just fantastic. Then, of course, right when the playoffs start, he does absolutely nothing for a week, and I unfortunately was unable to secure unable to defend my title. But
and to be honest, you said you traded for him. Who did you trade to get Aaron Judge?
It was a big package. I'd have to pull it up. It was Fernando Tatis Jr. and a pitcher, and I can't remember who the pitcher was, but I'd have to pull it up. It's possible it could have been. I'd have to look it up. I'd have to look it up to make sure that I had the pitcher right. But it was interesting that the guy who I was trading with was initially hesitant about the idea of trading Judge, but Judge had kind of slowed down at that point. So he was open to it, and his team outside of Judge was very thin. So it was a multiplayer trade that he eventually decided that he wanted to do. And almost instantly after, like the next day, Aaron Judge homered. And then the day after, he had 2 home runs and then continued. I was working with him that week, and my phone would go off at the ESPN fantasy alert, Aaron Judge home run, over and over and over again. So it was kind of the personal tormenting. But
Yeah, I don't know if
but
I would trade Aaron Judge. That
yeah,
package has to be like the most beautiful package you can ever present to me to trade Aaron
yes.
Judge. But that's me.
Well, if it was you, I probably wouldn't have even tried. But maybe if there was a Red Sox or a Met, then I would give a little bit extra on bias points, even though I try not to
That's true.
cloud my
That
fantasy
is true.
judgment
That is
with
true.
bias. But you know what? It happens from time to time. So the last thing I want to ask you about Boston is the same I've asked you about the Yankees. That when you look at their starting staff with Houck, Bueller, Giolito, or look at their lineup, either with the big guys like Duran and Devers and Bregman, or with the Yoshidas or Connor Wong or Rafaela. Are there any of those names that stand out to you as someone that you're thinking, maybe this player is being overrated, probably doesn't deserve the attention that they've been getting thus far?
Uh Again, I don't see as anyone being overrated. Maybe it's just the way I look at their lineup. I truly think Duran is gonna be great for them. I think he came in last year. He was just so good. Jaron Duran is gonna be amazing for them. And then you look at, like you said, Devers, Bregman. You could say maybe Bregman only because, but even then, he has the Green Monster now, and
Yeah.
he's gonna use that to his best ability. So, again, I wouldn't say anyone's overhyped, but again, the underdogs, and they have something to prove. Boston, they've come out last year. They had an okay year, but now they're willing to go out and talk the talk. You know what I mean? They can talk the talk, but
Yeah.
let's walk. Let's go do it. So again, I don't see anyone being as overhyped, but I think they have a lot of scrappy players. That's the thing too. It's not like guys say, "Oh, this guy is not as good as everyone says he is." Honestly, away from the offense, if we can go there, we didn't even mention him. Chapman is now on the Red Sox
Yeah.
as their closer. That's someone I could say is overrated. Again,
And
he could give you good innings, and he comes in and he's a presence that's like, man, I don't want to go up against this guy. But his reputation the past couple of years has not shown you that.
Bregman, the note about Bregman and the stadium is really a big deal for Bregman in terms of where he's going to sign. Just discussing this on prior podcasts in terms of his park reliance of his home runs. Bregman's a guy who can hit you quite a few homers, but is not a high end power guy, especially in terms of distance. And when you look last year at the expected home run charts, had 31 expected home runs at Minute Maid Park, which led all major league stadiums, tied with Colorado, actually just behind the White Sox stadium, which is ever changing in terms of name. But the Red Sox ballpark was on the higher end of that in terms of expected home runs. Obviously, he's a guy who's going to pull a lot of fly balls in the air and really needs a shorter fence on that. Not necessarily in terms of height, of course, but in terms of distance to be able to get them. Just looking at the expected home run totals, and obviously Baltimore is quite poor. Would have hit 14 had he played all his games there last year, but a number of stadiums where he would have hit well below 20, and that's someone that I'm really trying to put in a place like Boston, where the Green Monster is going to help him a lot. I said last thing before, but there is something else I want to ask you about at Chapman before we move on to our next team. They've got a bit of a closer by committee in Boston now. Aroldis Chapman would be the favorite, you'd think, to
Yeah.
take over the closing job full time, but it's definitely not a foregone conclusion because they've got Liam Hendricks, Justin Slayton there. Could see a world where Garrett Whitlock starts to get some closing opportunities. But do you think Chapman retains the closing position long term over a Hendricks or Slayton or Whitlock?
Depends on how he pitches. Again,
Yeah.
if Chapman is on, he's on. I don't want anyone else closing. But he's shown you, and trust me, I know the games that he's blown for the Yankees, but even just other teams too. So and even going back to when he was in the Cubs in the World Series, like in his big spots and stuff like that, he's always had a reputation of that of kind of crumbling under pressure. So it depends. If he ends up coming out, I know in the last year with the Pirates, he was very, very good. So maybe it's just a big spotlight that he doesn't like. I'm not necessarily sure. But if he gets off to a good start and is really lights out, there's no doubt that I would put him there. I think that's the only place he really fits. And then Liam Hendricks, again, it's like another Luke Weaver in the sense that he could be your setup man, but he could also close on any night if you need him to. So I would say it's trial by fire, just or trial by error, whatever way you want to say it. Depends on how the season goes. Really, the way I see it.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I'm rooting for Hendricks to reclaim his former self, but of course, with everything he's been through off the field, you don't know whether he's able to get to that. Chapman's been through a lot off the field too, but that's his own doing. Hendricks, obviously, you got the nice guy, mean guy kind of combo there.
Yes,
so
definitely
pretty easy from the neutral perspective. But so outside of the Yankees and the Red Sox, there's a little bit of either disappointment or uncertainty with the other teams, and I think the squad that will be looked at with the most missed opportunity, at least from an offseason perspective, is Baltimore. Baltimore obviously has a great crop of young players. Jordan Westberg really took a step forward last year. Colton Cowser still has a lot of potential. Obviously, Adley Rutschman, despite struggling in the second half, is still one of the top catchers in the league. And Gunnar Henderson, of course, is their best player right now and one of their homegrowns. And it's not done. They've got Jackson Holliday. They've got Kobe Mayo. They've got Heston Kjerstad, who had a really rough season with a head injury and all. And those can be very difficult to come back from. And then they've got some guys that maybe don't have a spot. Samuel Basallo is probably the biggest one where I'm looking at a guy that is directly blocked and maybe could play some first base and take over Ryan O'Hearn's position. But with Baltimore, the biggest disappointment has to be the starting rotation, which right now, as a projected 5, is with Zach Eflin as their ace, new acquisition Charlie Morton, and Tomoyuki Sugano as well, combining. Sugano, of course, the veteran, 35 years old, coming over from Japan. Morton, seemingly ageless. I know he's 41. And then Dean Kramer and Cade Povich, both of whom were with the team last year. Povich struggled with walks in his limited time, still has potential, and Dean Kramer, pretty solid. That's not the most impressive rotation with that lineup, with those lineups that they're going to have to play in the AL East. Is that enough, do you think, to make them competitors? Or
no, I don't. I mean, again, you're going by what pitchers have done, the way I see it, which is, again, that could change. It can work for some teams. It worked for the Mets last year, right? Why can't it work for us? Type of thing. Let's get guys that have shown what they can do before, and let's see what they can do now. But I don't think that's viable in a division that is going to be so tight with the Yankees and the Red Sox. I think you have to have a certified ace, and that's what they missed out on in Burns. I mean, at the end of the day, in the league that we're in now, you have to pay your ace. You have to pay pitching. There's no way around it, the way I see it. If you want good pitching, if you want an ace and you want him, you have to pay for him. So if you're gonna try to cut corners, it's not gonna work. And obviously they try to cut corners. It didn't work. Corbin Burns is now in Arizona, and you're now with Zach Eflin, good pitcher, but as your ace, who really shouldn't be an ace on the staff. And now you're going into it again. It just every day is like, okay, let's see what this guy can give me. When it shouldn't be that way. When you have a crop of such young, great players at the helm waiting to just go off. And if you don't have starting pitching, that's not going to work.
And looking at Baltimore, it seems like they're trying to. You mentioned the Mets as one of the teams that was able to do it successfully. And it can be done where you put a lot of money into a pitching lab. You then acquire guys with attributes that you're looking for. Maybe it's, the guy you're just looking for supinators that have not really taken advantage of their ability to throw pitches with arm side breaks, say. And that's just, and one of a zillion examples. You can just find guys with good arms. You can teach pitches, guys with good pitches that you can teach other pitches. The Mets got Griffin Canning, and we'll see how that works out. I'm a little skeptical. They're going to teach him a sinker and a cutter and tell him to stop throwing his four-seamer because it's horrible. They've got Max Kranick, who had decent stuff, and they've improved his fastball and got him a sweeper. Clay Holmes, they've got him using a new kick change as a starting pitcher, and obviously the early spring training results are good. Have to see how that sustains itself over more of a period of time. The question with Baltimore, I mean, Baltimore is not a team that's likely to spend a lot of money, even under new ownership. They haven't really been aggressive in free agency. They've got Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, and Jackson Holiday all on pre-arb, and Adley Rutschman all on pre-arb deals. So they're paying them close to the major league minimum. This level of talent on the major league minimum does not exist on maybe 100% or at least all but maybe one or two other major league teams. Is it really worth trying to manufacture pitching from nothing when the team has, even if we're saying, okay, maybe the starters wouldn't have the track record, but the team would have the track record of creating starters out of nothing. There really isn't any assurance that they're not going to waste these guys. Do they ultimately make a trade, do you think, out of necessity and trade from this wealth of young stars?
They're going to need to, because they have so much. You can't prospect hug. And from obviously from Yankee standpoint, that's what they do a lot of the times. They prospect hug. They don't like to trade guys. Again, I understand if you have, I think this guy's going to be good. But sometimes if you want a player, if you want to win now, you got to make those trades. And if they're not active during this trade deadline, then there's going to be a lot of problems. Because I know last year they got Eflin. Who else did they get? They got off the top of my head. Oh my goodness!
They fortified their bullpen a bit, which was necessary.
Yes,
with
they did do that.
Felix Bautista,
yes,
on the sidelines and Yennier Cano. Now, the biggest issue for Baltimore last year was the fact that they kept persisting with Craig Kimbrell in the closer's position. Craig Kimbrell sort of still a free agent and far away from Baltimore. Can't hurt you anymore. He's throwing 92 nowadays, which might be a great career, debatably a Hall of Fame career. In my opinion, a Hall of Fame career. I know some people have issues with the relievers getting in. But I think out to pasture is the right place for Kimbrell. But I fully agree on the trade deadline. And even with the closer position, Felix Bautista is going to be back and has been one of the best closers in baseball. But his fastball is not what it was in spring training early. Now, is that cause for alarm? It's cause for some alarm. I mean, it's one of those where it's spring training, and of course you have to balance that. But also, it's the results in terms of the stuff aren't there yet. Are you concerned about Bautista? Do you feel like he's going to be fine long term?
I think he'll be fine. I think again, and I learned this covering the Hofstra baseball team, and it's always stuck with me. When I talked to head coach Frank Colanado, who did play in the major leagues, we were talking about a player that is going under Tommy John or had gotten Tommy John surgery. He had like 2 years ago. He had come back the prior year and wasn't himself, but then coming into the year that I was 2024, he emphasized that this year the year after is where you're really back to your normal self. That always stuck with me because yes, he got Tommy John last year. He's going to come back this year, try to regain his steps, but he's not going to be the player that he was when he was hurt, just before he got hurt. He's going to be the player that he has to gain that confidence, gain the momentum, gain the arm speed, gain everything back. So for me, it's more of a progression. If you see a degression, if you see it going backwards as the season goes on, then I'll be raised for concern. But as the season turns out, if by June, July, his ERA is good, he has a lot of strikeouts, a lot of saves, then I'm cool. I'm cool with that. If it's going in a positive direction. If it's not, as the season goes on, then that's a little cause for concern. But right now, you really have to let him get back into his groove, even though it is spring training. Just get him back into that mindset, and hopefully by the time June, July comes, August, he'll be back in that mindset and back to where more normal situation would be for him.
Yeah, and that's the other thing to note is he's not as far removed from the surgery as a lot of guys who still even haven't touched the field. So the fact that he's in some minds maybe ahead of schedule and just hoping that progression through the season where he can start peaking and down the stretch for Baltimore might actually be ideal in some ways. Obviously, they'll have to be careful with him. That if you're drafting Batista or even just an Oriole fan in general, got to keep in mind he's not going to pitch back-to-backs early. They're going to be really careful with him. I'm sure he won't pitch 3 in a row, at least until very late in the season. And they should be careful because when he's on, he is as good as any closer in the league.
Yeah.
So Baltimore's lineup, of course, is the one area where I think you can look at and say, sure, is there missed opportunity? Yes, but there's some real firepower there. Now, my concern is that you've got Gunnar Henderson and you've got Jordan Westberg, who seem to have established themselves as nailed-on pieces who are really quality major leaguers. The signing of Tyler O'Neill with the wall moving in, I think, was that's necessary to get O'Neill and, of course, beneficial for him. And then you've got O'Hearn, Mountcastle, but out of Colton Cowser, still Cedric Mullins, who has been up and down over with his bat particularly. Adley Rutschman after that second half, Jackson Holiday, Heston Kjerstad, and then the kids in the minors. Do they have enough certainty in that lineup to make it work offensively? Do you think that the sheer talent is enough to make it work offensively?
I believe so. But last year showed you that, they're young, they're kids, they're all young. It's going to take some time. That's why a veteran piece is so important in your lineup or even in your clubhouse. Having that couple veteran players, even one, can set a team far above another. And for them, they're just so young. So they're coming into this race, 2023, I'm sorry, they overachieved. No one thought they were going to do what they did in 2023. So then they went into 2024 going, we're in it. We're in it. We can win a World Series. We can get there. We can get far. We can get to the championship series. And then they crumbled on themselves. So last year was really a setback and a realization that this is a lot bigger than we anticipated. And we really have to show what they can do. And again, but they're young. And now they're coming into an even harder season with not even one team, just the Yankees. It's Yankees and Red Sox that you have to overcome. So for them, it's really, this year's going to be a test. Talent-wise, yes. Adley Rutschman, great catcher. I love Adley Rutschman. I love the way he plays the game. I think he's a great hitter. Then you have, again, Henderson. Henderson in the first half last year in the MVP conversation with Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. So he's nothing to bite off either. He's going to be he is a great player. And then all these other young guys who have shown that they can do a lot. Holiday still has a little more to show. I know last year was like an up and down thing. Is he going to start in spring training? Is he not? So this year is really a prove-it year in the sense that he can start off most likely on a fresh slate and maybe start up here and just continue his progression. But talent-wise, yes. But can they do it? It remains to be seen if they can all collectively be together. And that's why the pitching is so important. Because if they're going to go into games consistently down 3 runs, 4 runs in the first 3 or 4 innings, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And ultimately, if you don't have starting pitching at all, you cannot win. You can win with iffy offense, win some close games. You saw the Mariners kind of kept it up a little bit. Even the Phillies last year, I think, were a great example, who had one of the best rotations in baseball. Yeah. And that offense really went dormant for times. And they kept their heads above water and kept that lead in the division. So that is where it's made. And I'm not seeing it. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't happen. Kate Povich could have a big breakout, but their bread and butter is going to be their offense. They might win a lot of 8-7 games with Batista closing it out. Now, my closing question for the Orioles for you is with Adley Rutschman. You've got the catchers in that cluster of 3 guys who always have their bat in the lineup of Aaron Diaz, Adley Rutschman, and Salvador Perez, who are playing virtually every day because, of course, Salvi will play first base. When he's not catching, honestly, a lot of first base now, but still has catcher eligibility fantasy-wise. Aaron Diaz is playing virtually every day, either DH or catching, and Rutschman will presumably do the same with Gary Sanchez now in Baltimore. Do you have a preference of those 3 if you're targeting a catcher out of that cluster of Yainer Diaz, Adley Rutschman, and Salvador Perez of a guy that you prefer?
It's gonna be. Sometimes you have to think about these questions, but for me, it's Rutschman. Rutschman
Okay.
has showed you that again, still young. Uh, he showed you a lot of the power that he has from both sides of the plate, and then his defense
Yeah.
as well. But and he's I just like the way he plays the game. Now Diaz again, I feel like Diaz is reliable in the sense that if you need a catcher that can, if it's middle of the road catcher for me, again, a good player, but I'll take him. But but then looking at Perez, if you want a leader, a guy that's been through it, been to the World Series, uh, done everything. He's a good guy that the captain of the Royals. You go with Perez. But if I really want a consistently good bat, and not as old of a guy, comparing him with Perez, I think for me, Rutschman he has such a big upswing because he's so young. So for
Yeah.
me, it's Rutschman, and I just love his game, and I think he's going to be great for the Orioles for years to come.
And that's the guarantee you get with Rushman, or maybe the concern that you have with Salvi that you don't have with Rushman is that steep cliff of Salvi has been super productive
Yeah,
for the last few years offensively, but at some point with those older guys, it gets to a point where it can get very steep, and they stop at once. Especially with someone like Salvi, who is a great hitter but swings at a lot of pitches outside the strike
yeah.
zone. Is really, he likes to hit.
Yeah, and with Salvi too. I mean, you look at the teams from a couple years ago, after the World Series teams, and before now, not making the playoffs. He took a little bit of a dip because the teams weren't that good. So
Yeah,
sometimes when you reinvigorate a squad and a team and a franchise to make playoff runs with Bobby Witt, now Jonathan India, and a lot of different acquisitions that you get, you revitalize a player. So I think that's what's happening with Perez is that he is now on the older end of possibly a championship winning team, whereas before he was on the younger end. So it's a different role for him. But I feel that now that they're in contention, he can pick up his game, and it's a different role for him. But he likes the role that he's in, and
yeah.
that's why Salvi's. It's even though he said he's been productive, he likes to swing a lot of pitches outside the zone. He's a veteran piece that is just you need him to be there.
And as a great transition from the Orioles to the Blue Jays' big fish that they finally landed offensively was Anthony Santander. After, I mean, I have tremendous sympathy for Blue Jays fans after watching them get so close to Ohtani, where he was allegedly on a plane to Toronto and then wasn't, and then he was a Dodger, and then the hype around Juan Soto going there, and then he was a Met,
Yeah.
and the repeated getting close to free agents, whether it was Willie Adames or obviously they finally got Santander. Uh, is Santander a bigger loss for the Orioles or a bigger get for the Blue Jays?
Bigger loss for the Orioles. I mean, you talk about lose again. The Orioles are losing more than they're gaining, which is the
Yeah,
thing that I look at. You're losing more players than you're gaining, and then that's not the way you want to do it. You want to gain more and lose less. Or if you lose a lot, you're gaining a lot more. You have to keep it
of
even.
course.
For
Yeah,
the Blue Jays, however, although it is a great bat to get, it doesn't really move the needle for me looking at it because I didn't think the Blue Jays really needed him in a sense. Again, it's another power bat that they really don't need, right? You
yeah.
have Laddie, you have Bichette, you have Springer. I just think the Blue Jays don't really know what they're nothing that they don't know what they're doing, but the way they're reconfiguring their whole team, it's like they're doing certain things that I don't know. I felt like they just got Santander just to get somebody, and they were
Yeah.
able to get him. But you're going to a team that I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do. And like I said, like it's a great transition because a bigger loss for the Orioles is losing Santander, and then now you're going to the Blue Jays. But what really is he gonna do over there? And that's the way I
Yeah.
look at it.
No, and I totally agree with that. It seemed to me like at some point it was just the Blue Jays going around saying, "Will somebody take our money?"
Yeah,
We missed out on 5 or 6 guys, even just from Ross Atkins keeping his job. At some point, you've got to land someone because the fan base is understandably concerned. if you look at this lineup, obviously you've got Bichette, who had a down year, and you hope bounces back. Vladdy really turned it on last year and
Yeah.
has 1 year of team control. That it seems pretty clear that he's going to stay in Toronto this season, at least until the trade deadline. And it seems like he's not signing an extension, or at least his deadline, his self-imposed deadline for signing an extension has passed. And the report was that Vladdy was seeking a deal near $600 million, and that the Blue Jays had given him a massive offer that he had declined, and free agency is inbound. And they made a couple other smaller additions. Miles Straw seemingly was more to set up a second acquisition that did not happen, which I feel bad for Blue Jays fans. Again, that seemed like a rather pointless trade, but they did get Andres Jimenez, who gives you a little bit more defense, a lot more defense than they had up the middle. Still have Davis Schneider to, get on those cool hot streaks and hit home runs. I will say, for those that are looking at the roster resource projections for the Blue Jays, I have no idea why Dalton Varsho is listed at the DH and Loperfido in center and Santander in right. I would bet anything that Varsho is going to play center field, and if he's not, he's going to play left. He's definitely not DHing. But their lineup as a whole looks more balanced, and then they've gone with the starting pitching approach of just really compacting it with veterans. You had Gausman, Barrios, and Bassett already there. Bowden Francis had a tremendous second half of the season with some big time starts. And then Max Scherzer, who is at the ripe old age of 40, joining the team. Any concerns about the rotation with the age there? Or do you think that the experience that they have will prevail with some pretty quality pitchers?
The only really concern for me is Scherzer. Like you said, he's aging. He didn't do that well with the Mets. Obviously, I know, as you know that. Then going to the Rangers as well. Yeah, he was on that World Series team, but didn't really do anything. From what I remember. So
Yeah, no, you're right.
it's again, it's a pickup because again, he's Max Scherzer. It's you're getting him more for the name than what he's gonna offer you right now. The way I
Yeah.
look at it, and yeah, maybe you know what, maybe because last year, honestly, you list those guys and Barrios and Gausman and Bassett. Those are not bad guys. That's pretty solid to me the way I look at it, and the things that they have done. But maybe they just got him to show these younger guys more again, a veteran guy that can show them the way. Because again, Toronto, I mean, look, they don't have a bad team. I don't think they do, but they just haven't performed to what they're capable of. And then everyone knows 2021 was they broke out, but then they haven't done anything since. So they're trying to catch a spark, and that's maybe why they trading for Jimenez and getting Miles Straws and going and getting Scherzer is trying to just trying to do something. Because again, if you can get a good roll going, you could hop Baltimore, maybe hop Boston, you maybe hop the Yankees. So many different ways these different ways this season can go. But then you're looking at what they're doing with Vladdy, which is something I don't understand. Is you're willing to give all these other players all the money they want, but then with Vladdy, a guy that wants to stay here, is asking for a certain amount, you don't want to give it to him. I don't understand why they won't. They can build around him, but that's a question for the trade deadline in the offseason next year. I definitely think if the Toronto is a first half team right now.
Yeah.
If they
And
don't contribute in the first half, they're selling everything at the trade deadline.
yeah, you can bet. I'm certain that regardless of the status of Ross Atkins, they're not going to make the same mistake that the Angels made with Otani and hold on for dear life. Vladdy, assuming he produces the way you'd expect, should bring a massive return back to the Blue Jays, even as a rental at the trade deadline. And of course, at that point, you're looking at anything you can get for Springer. You obviously have to pay down that contract. Bichette, even flipping Andres Jimenez again would have to be paid down. So iffy. But you look at the front three in that lineup of what should project as Bichette, Vladdy, and Santander. And you're going to have some mix of Springer, Alejandro Kirk, Dalton Varsho, Loperfido, Ernie Clement, Will Wagner, Davis Schneider, and then, of course, minor league wise, you've got Aurelvis Martinez, who is my favorite Blue Jay prospect by quite some distance. Of course, starting pitching, they've got a couple that you've got to mention. Tiedemann is injured, but fantastic when he's on the field. And Jake Bloss, I think, is the most likely to make the rotation. They got him at the deadline last year. My question really more so their lineup. The rotation's kind of embedded in terms of what it's going to be on opening day. Is there enough past Vladdy and Santander and even Springer to make that offense an above average offense and have them competitive at least for a wild card?
Yeah, I believe so, but
Okay.
everything has to go right. That
Yeah.
I think you can't go into a season and be like, oh, I don't. Well, maybe they can turn out. If they can have a spark, then yes, absolutely. I think there's enough there to make a wild card or to really push some buttons and push other teams, scaring maybe Baltimore away or scaring Boston or scaring the Yankees. There's enough there, but for
Yeah.
me, everything has to go right. And if everything doesn't go right, it's not going to work out for them. And that's why I feel if you really can stamp down Vladdy, it makes it easier for you to build a team around him. Whereas, I mean, but again, if you want to, if they're looking to trade him at the trade deadline, which I truly believe that's the way they're gonna go, you can get like you said a big return for him, and maybe do a rebuild, sell everyone, trade everyone, and start from scratch again. But I don't think anyone really wants that
Yeah.
when you had or have and maybe at that time had Vladdy in your hands and let him go. So it's gonna be very interesting to see the way that Toronto goes about the season. But they if ownership and general managers and the front office is looking at it as we're gonna trade this guy at the trade deadline without any hesitation, then there's no reason to put the players out there that you're gonna put out. You understand what I mean?
Of course, and it also depends. It's very different when you have a general manager like Ross Atkins, who's probably on his last leg in terms of keeping his
Yeah.
job, where he'll be as resistant as possible to trade away. Once he gives up on the season, he's giving up on his job. In essence, the Blue Jays are not going to keep him around if they have another failure of a season, and his job is essentially reliant on this working. So whether the Blue Jays, of course, would fire him mid-season and then bring somebody else in to be in charge of a rebuild remains to be seen. The other big money splash for Ross Atkins was spending $36 million on Jeff Hoffman. Jeff Hoffman, of course, had a great year with the Phillies, faded a bit towards the end of the season, rough playoffs, but is really emerged as one of the most surprisingly dominant relievers in the game. Now, the concern with Hoffman is that he reportedly failed 2 physical examinations with the Braves and with the Orioles, and then signed for less money with the Blue Jays. Now, 3 years, $36 million, still a lot of money, especially for a guy who's not even apparently not even committed to be their closer, although I'd have to imagine he'll win the job. Is Hoffman, in your mind, a good enough guy to be a nailed on, like reliable top end closer? And how worried are you about that? Failing 2 physicals before signing with the Blue Jays, is that not concerning?
I think it is because at that point you could become desperate, right?
Yeah,
Become desperate on any team that was willing to sign you, and doesn't matter. Oh, just sign me here. Yeah, even though I failed 2 physicals, it's gonna be fine. So I would
yeah,
be worried. Not Hoffman. I mean, Hoffman got his money. You're gonna get your money. You got your contract.
of course.
But for the Blue Jays side, is it more desperate as because you lost Romano, who was, I mean, a great closer for you a couple years ago. Now who do you have in the back end? So you're really just throwing it up in the air and seeing what sticks, and that's really what they think is gonna stick. And hey, who knows? Maybe they're right. But for me, it's more bad on the Blue Jays if they're just doing it to do it and not see what everyone else has been seeing. If you understand what I'm saying,
Yeah,
in the sense that just getting someone just he's the closer, but are you sure he's going to be able to close one game and not be injured for the rest of the season? Type of thing. So
yeah.
the Blue Jays again, I think they have their head screwed on not right. If you ask me.
Well, and that ultimately means that they are entirely reliant on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to produce superstar level numbers to a point where even if he does, I mean, he was kind of a superstar last year, and it wasn't enough because they failed to build around him with the pitching and failed to build around him with the hitting. And as you mentioned, maybe desperation with Santander and Jeff Hoffman. Like, is that a wise use of really the last string
Exactly.
for this regime? Now with Vladdy, and the talk is going to be around him, his average draft position is right around Julio Rodriguez and Francisco Lindor. And you have a cluster of almost 3 identically ranked position players of Julio Rodriguez, Vladdy, and Lindor in that order. Of those guys, are you looking at one that you'd prefer over the other two if you're drafting at the end of a first round, someone who you're banking on having a big season? All, of course, potential MVP candidates.
Wow. See, this is one that I really have to think about. It's not really I don't have a sure answer. To have a big season, oh man, honestly, it's gonna be between Lindor and Vladdy, and then
Yeah,
between them two, it really depends. I mean, look, Lindor is coming off a great MVP caliber season,
yeah,
and now with Juan Soto on your team, it's gonna give you just that more, like much more, uh, reinvigorating of yourself to produce more. And
yeah,
going to NLCS last year and putting yourself in the position to be a championship team. Whereas Vladdy is because Lindor got his contract.
yeah.
Vladdy needs his contract. And are you gonna see a Judge type MVP season where he bet himself? Possibly. But then at the same time, is he really just thinking about himself, or is he thinking about the team?
Yeah.
So if I were to say, I would say I would bank on more Lindor. Lindor has been here for a lot longer, has showed you what he can do defensively and offensively. I would probably out of those 3 pick Lindor, and then Vladdy second, and Julio last.
Okay. And I honestly could see Vladdy or Lindor having a bigger season. It
Yeah,
really is a difficult one because
toss up.
you obviously Lindor's had that level of consistency, especially if you're looking at the trends of him improving as the season went
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
And then you have Juan Soto, but also Vladdy can do things with his bat that Lindor can't. And regardless of obviously it being more impressive for a shortstop, especially a Gold Glove shortstop, the fact that Vladdy could hit 40 plus homers, have 1,000 OPS, he'll get a ton of walks, ton of doubles. He could be the best hitter, or one of the best hitters in the league. It'd be tough for him to surpass Judge in the American League, but
it's
he could
possible.
certainly be second to him. And
Yeah,
look, I mean, Judge is fantastic. There is a world where Aaron Judge succumbs to injury and Vladdy becomes in that race. So, truthfully, I think it would probably take something like that to take it away from Wade or Judge or someone in that conversation. Of course, both Witt and Judge should give you top end defense at premium positions as well, in addition to their big bats. So last year we saw the Tampa Bay Rays experiment finally hit a roadblock, and Tampa, of course, goes in every season with a bunch of guys that most people have never heard of, that certainly not recognizable names to the casual fan, at least. A combination of reclamation projects, their own minor leaguers, just trying to manufacture something out of nothing for what is a very low budget operation. And it didn't work last season, which is a rarity because it's usually the kind of team that gets in the playoffs and you look at their roster and you just wonder how. But last year they had a lot of injuries in the starting rotation, some of whom are back this year, particularly McClanahan and Rasmussen should be healthy for opening day. They had some injuries to their lineup, but more notably, some of the gambles that they took. Johnny DeLuca didn't hit. Jose Siri, who had a monster year for them a couple of years ago, didn't hit for them last year, and they traded him for Eric Orzi, a relief pitcher, who I think was going to be fantastic for them. But Christopher Morel, they acquired at the deadline and somehow got worse, almost unheard of. So now you have a lineup in Tampa where you look at Yandy Diaz, who's done it plenty. You look at Brandon Lau, who is a pretty reliable bat when he's on the field. You look at Josh Lowe, who's hit right-hander as well. Junior Caminero is a great prospect. And then it's like, okay, Danny Jansen is a reliable enough catcher. You still have Rortvet, who is adequate. Jonathan Aranda, Christopher Morel, Johnny DeLuca, Taylor Walls, Jose Caballero, Curtis Mead, Richie Palacios. And then ultimately you've got some some support in the minor leagues, and Ha-Seong Kim coming back. There's a lot of uncertainty in that Rays lineup. Now, I'm asking you, as someone who's watched Tampa do it, and someone who has watched your Yankees, who are better on paper every year, sometimes struggle against Tampa to guys that you wouldn't expect. Is there enough there? Is Tampa in a position to recreate that magic of yesteryear or of 2023 and before that, where they've performed well above their heads?
I don't believe so. Now, look, there's a lot of names on that list that I necessarily did not know, but towards
Of course.
obviously the back end, like I know Christopher Morel,
Of course.
obviously all the guys. There's a lot of guys at the back end. I was like, I don't know who you're talking about,
Of course.
but you look at the top, and it's not a bad. You could. It's a serviceable lineup, but I just think there's a lot of things going against the Rays that they're not playing at home. They don't have a home stadium this year, right? They're
Yeah.
they're playing at George Steinbrenner Field, so
True. Yeah.
a lot of things going against them. Now, are they a scrappy team? They're always going to be a scrappy team. I think they're always going to give teams trouble, especially the Yankees and especially the Yankees, obviously. But I don't think they have enough. I think, like you said, I think it's kind of come to a halt. The Rays really need to kind of look at the situation and see what else they can do. It worked a couple years ago. It worked in 2020, worked in 2021, but it hasn't really worked since then. And well, a lot. It has, but it was more of a first half team than a later on team in the second half.
Yeah.
So now it's more looking at, this year they're kind of like, all right, let's see what we can do. And the only really acquisition that they made was Kim that I could see.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if their pitching is enough. Guys coming off an injury, sometimes you can't really rely on them too much to carry a team. So the
Yeah.
Rays, I think it's easy to say that they will probably finish last in the East, just because of so many things are going against them, so many things that they have to overcome. That I think is just not serviceable in this year, especially in a tight race.
And much like the Yankees, they're a team that you kind of rely upon to manufacture at least middle relievers from nowhere, where you can look at Tampa and say, okay, well, the bullpen at least will be okay. Now, Tampa, if you look on the surface, has some starting pitchers that could be excellent. But then beneath the surface, you say, okay, well, if McClanahan is healthy and great, and Rasmussen is healthy and great, and Taj Bradley takes a step forward, and Pepio finally harnesses command, and Boss stays on the field. A lot of if they stay on the field, even for someone like Joe Boyle, who I love and throws 100 miles an hour and has no idea where it's going, I don't think that there's a single guy in this entire staff that I could reliably say he's going to stay on the field, he's going to give you 180 innings, and he's going to give you certain quality. And that's where I'm looking at Tampa with a lineup that is, as you mentioned, serviceable, but they're not going to outslug teams. So they're essentially pinning their hope on a whole bunch of high ceiling, but really guys that don't have a floor starting wise. It could get really bad for them with some more injuries like they had last year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the best player for them that can really show. I think Christopher Morel is a great player. I think he will do. Again, you get traded last year. It's you as a player going from a team that was a Cubs team that was possibly looking to do something to a team in the Rays that were really out of it at the end.
Yeah.
The really most of the season. It can deteriorate the willingness to play. But even this year too, I think he'll do better. But he's probably going to be one of the better players out of that lineup on that team. So again, like you said, you have to really just go by by ear and see how they're going to do it. And I think the big thing, maybe people don't make it as big of an issue as I have, but not having that home stadium is going to hurt. Again, I mean, even though that stadium wasn't a serviceable or very good one, you're playing at home. Now you're playing at another ballpark where it's just not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. So I think like I said before, Tampa's going to have a lot of things against them, and like you said with the lineup and even the offense. I mean, the pitching. A lot of players that are very injury prone. So I can see them selling some guys at the trade deadline if they don't acquire more people before the season starts. That's very much a possibility.
And they're in a low enough budget that they're just not going to have that option of being able to rebuild through free agency outside of the guys like Ha-Sung Kim, who are,
Yeah.
it's a good, clever addition at a low price. And obviously he's not going to be on the field until about May, so they'll have to cope with that internally. And I agree entirely about that. Stadium's going to hurt them because it's definitely more hitter friendly than the park they're used to. And as we mentioned, it's not a team. They're not going to outslug team. Yandy Diaz is not the kind of player to really benefit off of a small ballpark. He hits line drives all over the field, average hitter. And when they got, if you look at George Steinbrenner Field almost functioning as, in a way, like it's going to be a second home for the Yankees when they go there.
Yes.
It's similar dimensions. Of course, as you know, when the Yankees go to Tampa, regardless of where it is, there's more Yankee fans than Rays fans. It's going to be an outdoor stadium that they're not used to. That's not going to. They're essentially playing double the amount of games at Yankee Stadium to a degree, albeit the weather's probably a bit nicer to start the year. But,
yeah.
The one benefit though that could come from a player perspective, certainly not from a team perspective as a whole, is that we've heard from some players like Willie Adames in the past noted that the lighting in Tampa is very poor because of the indoor stadium and the background not providing a great hitting environment. And now you've got an outdoor stadium with a pretty clean batter's eye where it's always either going to be sunny or torrential downpour, and they're not playing in torrential downpour. And maybe that helps someone like Christopher Morel see the ball a bit better, especially someone that strikes out, ad nauseum the way that Morel does.
No, yeah, I think I didn't even think of that, but it does make sense, right? That's again, you're not playing at home, but wherever you're playing, it's you're gonna have the best ability because honestly, Tampa was considered probably one of the worst ballparks. I had never been there, but one of the worst ballparks in baseball just because the catwalks up and the on the roof and the white roof where you couldn't even see the ball and all those little janky rules about if it hits this and that. You don't have to deal with that anymore. So now if you're on the Rays and like you're like Yandy Diaz, who has played in that stadium before, maybe it's more of a willingness to, I don't have to be secluded in that arena and that stadium, and I can be a better player because I don't have to play there anymore, which is, like you said, can be a benefit. And then it also gives Tampa a lane to be like, hey, let's build a new stadium. I know what they want to do. So it gives them more of an emphasis and a push to be like, oh, wow, let's, instead of rebuilding the one that they already had when they were already trying to move out anyway, just stay at Steinbrenner Field and build the other one. It's a lot of pros and cons to what they can do.
Well, it makes sense at this point, especially given the kind of cost that you're looking to rebuild Tropicana Field. So, at that point, it's kind of, it pushes them over the line. It's like the kid that's on the edge of the pool, scared to jump in, spend all the money on the new stadium. Well, now you've got to, because it's going to cost you a ton of money either way.
Exactly.
They're losing revenue playing at Steinbrenner Field because, of course, they've got to compensate the Yankees, and the capacity is lower. Well, it'll be interesting though, because we will on occasion see sold out Tampa Bay Rays games, which I don't think I've seen a sold out Tampa Bay Rays game since 2008. So in the World Series.
Yeah.
So that's, good for Tampa, at least from a fan's perspective. Now there are, I would say, two players that have potential to be top players for Tampa in terms of trade assets, in terms of just watching them fantasy value. And Junior Caminero, who of course has kind of been on the fringe of breaking out for a year now, going to play third, short, second, etc. And Shane McClanahan, who of course was great before Tommy John surgery. The stuff since he's been back in spring training has been fantastic. It's been basically where it was when he got hurt, which is best case scenario for Tampa. If you had to put your marbles into the pen of either one of those guys, of Caminero or McClanahan, betting on them to have big years, are there either of them that you look at and say, I'm really backing a big season from this one?
Man, it's hard to say. I think they're both gonna have big seasons, but I think McClanahan is probably getting more. I think he's gonna. I'll put more of my marbles into him, just knowing that he'll probably be their ace, and try to bring them somewhere, try to give them some motivation, and try to get them to maybe finish third or finish fourth in division instead of finishing last. But then also a player that you didn't mention, I honestly, Yandy Diaz is one that I
Yeah.
look at as a tradable asset uh, coming to trade deadline. I know there was a lot of conversations last year with him and wanting to trade him, and him being kind of like maybe the Yankees will get him because they need a first baseman. Or a lot of other teams, he was thrown out there. So I definitely think if the Rays are not going to give them a good season and he's there producing like he always usually does, he's another tradable asset that I can put my marbles on too. But I probably, if you ask me about McClanahan and Caminero, I would say McClanahan.
And Yandy in division could still be a fit. I mean, the Yankees could very well have a need at that third base, first base, DH, of course, depending on where Jazz plays and depending on how that infield pans out. And of course, Goldschmidt could be anywhere from a 550 OPS wash up to a guy who has close to an 800 OPS and bounces back and has a strong year. So, you've got plenty of potential to be traded even in division. There. The other name you mentioned, Morel, I want to ask you now.
Yeah.
Morel has had some struggles defensively, basically wherever they've put him. He can play for more or less everywhere. Now, I also am backing him to have a big season. Where do you think he ultimately sticks positionally? Or does he stick anywhere positionally? Is he a DH? Is he a utility guy? Is he eventually a third baseman or an outfielder?
I would see him more as an infielder, if you're going to
Okay.
ask me.
Yeah.
I know he's played. Well, so he's played. I remember him as a shortstop.
Yes.
Right shortstop. So then,
I mean, he's played literally every position on the diamond outside of catcher and played them all pretty poorly. But he's got tools, like he can run. He's got a good arm, great arm actually. It's just a matter of finding a spot.
So then, if you look at it that way, again, I know Christopher Morel as a player, but I don't really watch any. I didn't watch the Cub games or anything like that, so I didn't really see him play. But either third, because you said he has a great arm, or you put him at second. Second is probably the most reliable place because you don't have to throw as far, and it's a natural position for a lot of people. Short is more you have to cover a lot of ground. It's something that some players just don't get. And when you're already in a rut and you're going to go play short or even third, you kind of put yourself in that position that like, I'm in a really difficult position. Whereas second, it's not as difficult as you would say.
Yeah. I could totally agree with that, especially because the consequence of playing poor defense at second is not as great as the consequence of playing poor defense at short. So look, if he's a bad defender at second, but he starts hitting home runs all over the place, then like you'll take that.
You're fine with it.
Yeah, exactly. And at short, and the Rays have tons of infielders between Walls and my favorites. Yeah, I don't know when he'll be up, but at some point in the next couple of years, Chandler Simpson, who is maybe the fastest baseball player I've ever seen, will be called up, and Tampa's going to turn him into a guy who hits 340 by hitting P-rollers up the third base line. I can just tell it. I can already see the future Aaron Diaz raging at the cheap hits that he's getting at the expense of the Yankee infield. But
probably,
yeah, I don't envy the necessity to play Tampa every year. But to close it out, I'd like to discuss the roster and standing projections. And to preview this, I'll go over the current full season projections for the Fangraphs, which is using their depth chart system, and Pacoda's projection for the AL East. And it's very, very condensed. More condensed than you'd expect, especially because, of course, the depth chart system is taking into account the injuries. So Fangraphs currently has the Yankees in first at 86 wins, the Red Sox in second at 85 wins, the Orioles and Blue Jays tied at 83 wins, and Tampa at 82 wins, meaning they have a 4-game gap between the first place Yankees and the last place Rays. Now, Pacoda has Baltimore in first at 88.5, Toronto in second at 85.5, New York in third at 85, Tampa in fourth at 82.5, and Boston at 80 wins. The only team of the 10 supposed options from the two projection systems who projected to finish under 500. So you have a wild range here where Tampa is projected to win 82 games either way. But the Yankees in third in one model, missing the playoffs, and the Yankees winning the division in the other. Baltimore missing the playoffs in one model and winning the division in the other. Are you? So I'll put you on the spot here. Can we get the Aaron Diaz in order top 5 of the American League East? How you believe it will pan out, and what I think is probably the hardest division to predict in all of baseball.
It's funny because when I made my list, preparing for this, I did it in order that I would do, like the teams that I would think, and
Yeah,
we just so happened to go in that same order. It's the
yeah,
Yankees, the Red Sox, the Orioles, the Toronto, and Tampa. I think that's if it may be easy. I'm not gonna try to take any hot takes, but that's what I see. I see it that way. Can it end up being Boston, Yankees, Orioles? Toronto, Tampa? Of course it can. I'm not denying that.
yeah,
But I think realistically, if you're looking at everything that everything given to us, I think that's the most digestible division that you could, the way it turns out and the way it can be. Uh, I think the Yankees again. I think the Yankees and Boston are now so much closer, like we mentioned a lot earlier. But for me, because the Yankees made it to the World Series last year, that gives them that much of an advantage
yeah,
because they're coming hungrier than they were before. So to me, that's the way it's going to turn out. And I know you want maybe some crazy prediction,
yeah.
but that's the way that's the way you went in order, and that was my prediction in the first place.
And that ultimately is my own projection, which hence the order. So I'm in agreement there. And look, I want honesty and if somebody's going to tell me why Tampa Bay is going to win the World Series, I'm interested to hear it. But I don't know that I'd buy it necessarily
Yeah.
unless we got some really outlandish argument about all of their infielders turning into the second coming of super utility guys. They beat Ben Zobrist times 15, but how many wildcard teams, though? That's the ultimate question. Because, of course, the divisional winner we've seen the AL East have 2, maybe even 3 wildcard contenders. Do you think that they get 2? Obviously, you figure the AL Central probably is not stacked. But from the West, you've got Seattle, you've got Houston. Texas should have a bounce back year. You can probably ignore the Angels, as much as I hate to say that. But
Yeah, probably not. Honestly, it's you can easily see the three teams out of the AL East easily,
yeah,
easily. I really don't see Boston missing the playoffs, nor do I see the Orioles missing the playoffs. Even though we've kind of buried them and really dug deep into what they've done this offseason, they're still a good team. Let's not deny that. So
of
I
course.
can't see those 3 teams making it into the playoffs from the AL East. But and I know you said Seattle. Seattle, I'm not really high on them. I'm not high on what they can do pitching wise. Absolutely, their starting pitching from last year was phenomenal. But offensively, I don't see them taking a step forward. Houston,
Yeah,
honestly, I mean Houston, it can be taking maybe a little bit of a step back, only because they've lost so many of those key guys that used to be there in the championship years. Then the Rangers too. They have a lot of those guys that were still there from 2 years ago. So AL West, I can understand why you see those 3 teams, but for me, it's going to be the Guardians and Royals in the Central that
yeah,
really kind of give a run for the money for the wild card, because I can easily see the Royals winning the division. I can easily see the Guardians winning the division again, and then regardless of who wins, they're fighting for a wild card spot with the Red Sox, with the Orioles, with the Rangers, with the Mariners. I really can see the wild card race in the in the American League being very, very tough.
yeah. And interestingly, I wouldn't have predicted this, but both models have Minnesota even as the divisional winner. Which, and
Interesting.
look, Minnesota has the talent, but has really been inconsistent when it's come to producing offensively. And of course, their pitchers are impressive. I like Pablo Lopez and still think
Yeah.
that he'll have a bounce back year. But the last thing I'll ask, and I agree entirely off of what you've said, and that I see the top 3 teams making it, and those teams in that order. The Yankees, I would have pinned if you had asked me a month ago as a potential mid 90s win team. they haven't had the best month to really no fault of their own,
Yeah.
just injury wise. What is the ceiling? Where are the Yankees going to end up win totals as division winner? Are we looking at 88? Are we looking at 90? Are we looking at lower, greater?
It really depends. I mean, if you look, you're gonna look at it like comparing to last year with Soto and going, oh, they're not gonna win more than I think how Yankees won what 94 wins last year.
The Yankees last season won 94 games.
94 games. So they won 94 games. If you're gonna go, oh, Juan Soto's not there, then they're not gonna win above 94. I wouldn't necessarily say that,
Yeah.
but I would probably leave it around there. 94, maybe topping out, maybe at 96, maybe. But that's in 96, 98 wins is more like they have to just be winning close games all season long and everything has to go right. You know what I
Okay.
mean? I think bottoming out, I mean, probably like 88. But I still, I think they finish within 90 to 94 wins.
And to close out, since you're a Yankees guy, I'll have to ask you this: the Yankees, we both agree, are divisional favorites. I think I'd be very surprised if they didn't make the playoffs in some form or another. In an ALDS, your four playoff starters in order, with the injuries that they have, with any trades they may make, who are those four?
So am I including trades that like
Yeah.
hypothetical trades that I think they will make and they have?
Hypothetical trades, minor leaguers, guys who you think might play their way in or out of the rotation.
Well, okay. So if you're gonna ask me hypothetical, all right. So I'll go a little. There's this one player that I think they really really want, and of course it's gonna come because I'm Dominican. If really wanted to see it, I think I would love to see Freed at the top.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just going off because I don't know. Freed at the top.
Yeah.
Alcantara second, Rodon, and then Schmidt. I think that's a nice four. And then if whatever Will Warren does, if he does very well and he's a 5, then all right, cool. I'm cool with that. And then if they end up trading Stroman or whatever happens with him, he ends up being somewhere below that. But if you have those four missing Cole, if you have Fried and Alcantara there, I really think that's gonna be a nice little touch for when Cole comes back and having those 3 guys there and 4 guys you can even say. I think that'll be amazing for them.
Yeah, that would be the watching, even as a Met fan, watching Sandy pitch in a sold out Yankee Stadium, going to his limits, which are, 130, 140 plus pitch. I mean, he claims he can do 150 in a game. Pitching a complete game at Yankee Stadium would just be electric, even as a Met fan. Yeah, as someone who,
Oh yeah,
I granted I'm not a Yankee hater, but I want to see Sandy pitch in a packed house in a playoff atmosphere, whether it's New York for the Mets or for the Yankees, or I don't know that I'd love seeing him with the Dodgers, but somewhere other than Miami where his talents can be appreciated in a playoff environment. Because of course he wasn't able to last year because he was hurt or a couple of years ago, and that it's fair to say the Marlins are not going to be in the postseason anytime soon.
no.
The way that those are going, so it's going to happen elsewhere. Hopefully, they don't leave him there to rot. But I'm pretty confident he'll get traded at the deadline somewhere.
Me too.
Who knows? Maybe that is the Yankees. But
Maybe.
Anyway, Aaron, I want to thank you for your time and for having you on this very enjoyable AL East preview podcast. I wish you the best of luck going forward with your Yankees, and should be a historically fun time in New York. For the Yankees and the Mets both competing for division titles, Subway Series will happen eventually. I'm calling it. At some point, we'll have a Subway Series back.
Hopefully, I really do. I know we've talked about this when we had classes past couple of years. I really do want a Subway Series one way or another before I die. Hopefully, one day we get it. But Nathan, on a serious note, thank you for having me on with you today. It's always great talking baseball with you. I love talking baseball, and you being a Met fan, me being a Yankee fan, it's always a great time, kind of just conversating, trying to be unbiased and trying to see where we land in the baseball world. But I truly thank you for having me on, and I'm more than willing to come on again if you ever need me.
Well, thank you, and honestly, I'd love to have you back. We'll have to set that
Thank
up for something in season. I think it would be great to have you on at some point. with some of those as the news rolls in, as the season gets started. Definitely some excitement looking forward. So I appreciate your time, Aaron. Make sure to go ahead and follow Aaron on Twitter. Aaron, you can plug any of your socials now. How can people get the most out of Aaron Diaz's baseball content that's rolling out?
All right, so I mean, I'm gonna have to look at my phone. I don't know my stuff off the top of my head,
Go
but
for it. Go.
I do Instagram. I mean, you could just look at my stuff at Aaron Diaz 0021, and then on Twitter, you could look up me up at, again, I'm not the most tech savvy person, at Aaron Diaz 223. So I'm mostly either on Twitter or on Instagram, mostly Instagram. I mean, if I really want to go deeper, I do write for Athlon Sports. I am a Braves freelance writer at the moment. So I am doing that. I do post a couple of those stories a week, depending on what happens with the Braves, essentially. But right now, I mean, yeah, I just gave you those plugs, and if you want to give me a follow, absolutely. And like I said, I'm more than happy to come on later in the year.
Go for it. See that he's working with the Braves now because he's bent on antagonizing the Mets fan in
No,
every way.
hold
So
on.
he'll get a Phillies job next. He'll be working for the Nationals, the Marlins.
Yeah, man,
And
whatever pays, man, whatever pays, whatever I can get my hands on to get my stuff out there, I'm gonna do it. So,
whatever pays, indeed. But thank you to Aaron. Don't forget to follow at Ethos Fantasy BB for the latest Sports Ethos Fantasy Baseball content. And thanks again to Bet Online for sponsoring this episode. And for now, peace out. Thanks, guys.